Welcome to this episode of the Down the Pub podcast. On this episode, we're going to look back at our exciting nil-nil draw against Pacific on the weekend, and we also have a very, very special guest, Kevin Anderson, also known as Hammer of Sparx. Am I saying that right, Kev?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Great podcast, great blogger, amazing. I'm so happy to have him on here, and he's also a super fan of Canadian football. So, Kevin, welcome to the show, and Chris, good to see you again, man.
Thanks for having me on the show, Anthony. I can't wait for this.
We're super excited too, man. So, just before I did kind of want to just get into. Obviously, we played fours this weekend, so I kind of want to talk a little bit about fours before we get into our nil-nil draw. Obviously, some two big topics are coming up today, and I thought you guys would be really good on this on these two. So, the first big one is obviously the NSL,
Mhm.
the Women's Professional League that's starting up, has announced that they've got a contract deal with TSN and CBC. This is something that anybody who's connected with CPL, whoever followed the CPL, is what we've wanted from day one. So I kind of want to get your opinions on why has these two broadcasters decided to go jump on that train and not our train? And I did have a follow-up question from one of our listeners regarding this, so we'll just check in with that a little bit first.
First of all, super exciting news to know that NSL has like that contract that it's going to be on CBC and TSN. We don't know exactly, what channels, how much coverage they're going to get, and all that kind of stuff. Will it be Gem? Will it be TSN 5 or the streaming network or whatever? But either way, it's super exciting to me. Um, to talk to your question, to kind of speak to your question a little bit about why did they get it and CPL didn't, kind of like thing. That's a really interesting one because I know CPL in the early days was trumpeting the fact that cable was dying and that's not the way to go. And I don't know how much of that was really just being hopeful about the deal they were able to strike. But they got a lot of money up front from Media Pro, right? So a lot of investment. So I think it was smart for them at the time. Hindsight 2020, and looking back now and seeing that in the 2020 season when they played on the island and CBC was covering some of the matches, or maybe it was the season before, I forget which, but they had kind of like a game of the week on Gem. I thought that was
Yeah.
amazing because it could reach people that don't ordinarily like aren't super fans buying the one soccer package and stuff, right? So I'm really hopeful for NSL. I think that's a really great bargaining chip they have now, and then it does explain why their salaries are structured the way they are, maybe partially because they've got some pretty big sponsors behind them and now a TV deal. It's disappointing that after 6 years, CPL still doesn't. But I mean, I'm of the mind though that rising tide floats all boats. So the better the NSL does, the more interest in local soccer happens, and I think that translates into help for the CPL as well. So I'm gonna choose to look at it as very positive because I get to watch them, and especially because I don't have a home team in Hamilton for the starting season, I'm gonna need that TV package. So.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So Chris, obviously, I wanted you to be the one with the negative outlook on this. No, but like it is a very interesting. It is a very interesting way of looking at it because question we had from Becca from the kitchen was, she knows next to nothing about the ins and outs of broadcast deals and sports, and even less about the relationship between one soccer and the CPL. But given the issue CPL has had in this regard. Do you think this deal for the NSL has any implications for CPL's broadcast future? Could have positive reverberations for them? Obviously answer our question first, but then also kind of like tell us uh, why this didn't happen. I know that Kev said about the money up front for Media Pro, but obviously like why didn't TSN and CBC jump on us from the get-go because of obviously with the World Cup coming up?
Well, to answer the first question, I think the reason why the women's game has been as attractive as it is over the last couple of years is because of the success of the NWSL. The WNBA this year has been such a boom, going back to the NCAA tournament over the last 2 years. We've seen the PWHL be a huge success, both in terms of television ratings and in terms of, I don't know if you guys saw during the season, I forget who the beer sponsor is. It might be Molson. I could be wrong. They shifted their jersey back. So then the girls' names were on the bottom of the jerseys instead of the top. And that was the most publicity I think I've ever seen women's hockey ever get outside of when Canada won gold. The reason I bring that up is because not only was it a great thing, it was a PR thing that worked. And it showed that when the platform is given and you think outside the box, people will pay attention. So with this, I don't know if it's going to be something that is going to benefit the CPL directly. I think that if these major networks wanted to invest in the CPL, there would have already been some kind of partnership or deal done up with Media Pro. I know Kev mentioned the CBC partnership early in the days.
Yep.
That I think was a necessity to an extent as well, both for the 8 owners and Media Pro, to make sure that the general base, the foundation, the viewers knew that this actually existed. Then year 2, year 3, year 4 was a subscription only model. Was that first year or first 2 years? Kev might be right. There might have been a game or two during the Island Games as well on CBC, but I do
Yep.
remember the first year there definitely was.
The CBC, I remember CBC covered quite a few games during the early games.
Yeah,
Yeah, as Kev said, they had kind of like a game of the week or whatever. So,
yeah.
yeah, sorry, cut across you.
No. And like Kev said, the money up front for a startup league had to be enticing. With this deal for the NSL, we're still not sure of terms, if there's any. Kevin mentioned this is a big reason why the salary cap is as high as it is, and that prospective revenue, even if it's a television deal that's free, or the NSL are actually like throwing a couple of bucks at TSN or CBC to get these games on, that perspective, that eyes on the product, you can't really put a dollar sign on that short term. It's what happens long term. So is this a gamble by the major networks? No. I think that the reason why it doesn't directly impact the CPL is because now I think that market is filling. I think you've got the MLS, you've got the NWSL. Now you're adding the NSL to that mix. Is there going to be room for the CPL? So the first thing that came to my mind today was my eyes were immediately looking at Rogers. TSN is a Bell property. CBC is kind of like a little bit of everything. They work with everybody to make things work, but they have a really close relationship with Bell. I'm looking at Sportsnet, I'm looking at Rogers, and I'm saying to myself, okay, fellas, ladies, the ball is now in your court. Um, you know, I was excited for today's news, obviously, for as a Canadian soccer fan, as a fan of women's sports, now as a father of a 10-month-old daughter, my whole perspective on representation and what this means has changed completely. I've always been more of a fan of women's sports. I've always coached women's sports, preferably over men's sports, just simply because to me, it's more pure to the sport. It's less about the money. It's less about who's watching. It's less about the corporate backing. It's more about the love of the game. That being said, you want to see that love of the game put on the forefront where men's sports has been dominated, and even amateur sports. We've got the Olympics coming up in a couple of months, or actually about a month now. Look at the corporate entities that have just completely invaded what is supposed to be amateur sport. You know what I'm saying? So to me, this deal, even though we don't exactly know the details of the deal, the potential of what can be for the NSL, I think in itself, you can't put a dollar sign on that. And I think that because the women marketing this league have been so marketable during their playing career, to see that immediately translating in the second phase of their lives as retired athletes, and in some of their cases they're still playing, like they're investing in their futures while they're still playing. The potential is endless. So to me, I don't really think it totally impacts the CPL, because I think that if anything, it's going to impact what Rogers does. And then I guess in turn that does impact the CPL. But if Rogers doesn't make that move, we really don't have a lot of options here in Canada to platform this. So I'm a little bit more fearful from a CPL perspective after today's news, because it just kind of feels like that market is full. Now my long-winded answer, I forgot the second part of the question, brother.
Oh, me too, to be perfectly honest with you. I know, but like, I just kind of picking up on something you said there.
Yep, yep.
You know, basically, it was like, why didn't TSN or Rogers jump on this from the get-go? And I guess just as well, like Kevin, just picking up on Chris's point there about like how they've marketed this so well, the NSL. Like as you said, like they're bringing in ex-players and they're using their profile to get things done. Did we make a mistake when the CPL was launched that we didn't do the same? Was there the same kind of razzmatazz when this thing was happening? Because I'm trying to remember back 2019, and like I can't remember to be honest, but because I'm old. But yeah, so why didn't TSN jump on with us, Kevin and oh sorry, yeah, Chris, and then Kev, if you want to answer the bit about how do we not mark ourselves correctly?
Real quick before, yeah, Kev, you can go right ahead, but real quick, I think if I'm not mistaken, the CPL came quickly. I remember we didn't start really hearing any mutters about it at all until real late 2017 about them refurbishing the Wanderers grounds. And then it wasn't until 2018, I think, when the club was announced, then we started to see Stephen Hart was introduced, players were introduced. It felt real, but we didn't know to what scale this was going to be. The ambition was there. And I think, our markets between Hamilton and Halifax have done a really good job making this seem and feel important within the greater Canadian soccer hemisphere. But I think that that's why the major networks didn't jump on the CPL, even if we marketed it as much as we could have, because I don't think then the psyche of Canadian soccer fans were domestic. We all grew up supporting clubs overseas. We all grow up supporting countries outside of Canada in some cases, in most cases. We've seen the history of the CSL in the past, and we've seen provincial leagues come and go, and we even see issues with BC year after year, and they've been dealing with stuff over the last couple of years as well, trying to get things off the ground in a semi-professional stance. So, Canadian soccer has always been volatile at best. You fast forward 5-6 years now, it seems like as an overall entity, the sport is not only well respected by those people, but it's mainstream. And the 2022 World Cup, the boys qualifying, the women winning gold in 2021 in Tokyo, both of those things go a long way because you don't want to support a loser. I mean, we do a damn good job of it, Anthony.
Yep, yep.
But I hate to say it, the bandwagon gets full when things get good, and we've even seen with the men's program over the last few months. Everybody's ready to jump off the cliff, and then all of a sudden, a 0-0 against France, and it's wow, we got a chance for the Copa. People's minds are quick to forget about the past. What have you done for me lately? And I think when the CPL came in, what have you done for me lately in terms of soccer? It just wasn't realistic for the mainstream. I think you fast forward to now, 2024. Like you said, Anthony, what did we do wrong? I don't really think we did anything wrong. I just think the market base is different.
Yeah, I feel like football fans at best are like batshit crazy because we're so like it's all or nothing really. It's very difficult to go, especially with international football, I find. So yeah, so Kev, what were your memories of like when Air League started and like did we obviously Stephen Hart is a big name here in Nova Scotia. He's obviously big in Canadian soccer because he coached the men's team. But was there like what was the razzmatazz around the league at the time? Do you remember? And have the women's professional league done things a little bit better?
Yeah, that's a really good point you bring up. And I remember back in the day, things started a little bit earlier here for us because we had heard rumors in our newspapers about something being done at Tim Hortons Field. So there was a league coming and supporters groups started like years before the league and stuff. But when it comes to the point of view of marketing our men's stars at the time, we really missed the boat in a way that the women are excelling at right now. Because I remember like Atiba Hutchinson and players like that making like little announcements like, we can't wait to support you and see the game. But it was very much like guys just lending their kind of credibility to the league as opposed to being involved in the
Yeah.
league. I've drawn a complete blank on the player. He was really successful in Portugal, a Canadian national team player, but he was always digging up possibilities of having a team in Quebec and stuff like that. He was probably the closest thing to what we had as like kind of some men's star power. And it just, I mean, it's pretty apropos that I've forgotten his name, which is absolutely horrible. But it makes the point that like seeing Canadian superstars like Christine Sinclair's name attached to it,
Yeah.
like they really are doing everything right from that point of view. And Diana Matheson leading the charge for it. I mean, that's a name that Canadian soccer fans know. And let's face it, the women's program carried Canadian soccer internationally for a very long time, right? And having the World Cup here in 2015 and, record crowds at BC Place and stuff like that on Canadian soil with women playing. So this league is, I think, in a lot of ways, way more marketable than the CPL because even when star players like who have a Canadian history, like Kyle Becker, captain at Forge, his name recognition is incredible to Forge fans, but to Canadian soccer public, like especially to like a little bit of the soccer snobbery, for a lack of a better term, he's a guy who didn't quite cut it at Canada's MLS side, right? So
Yeah.
that doesn't draw the star power that a Diana Matheson, a Christine Sinclair, and then hearing on the national team's farewell game or send off game, a couple of the players were opining about maybe coming back to play in the NSL because there'll be a team in Quebec. So for French Canadian players, there's a chance to actually play at home. And I think again something that we've missed out on by not having a team in Quebec for a myriad of reasons. But that's another thing that hurts marketing because in a bilingual nation, Ottawa is the closest thing we have to having a French team,
Yeah.
and really they're Spanish. So it hurts the marketability in a way across Canada, right? So I think the NSL is just really hit the nail on the head, starting the way they marketed it starting out, and I think another advantage they have besides having such a successful women's program internationally is that they got to see the mistakes the CPL made,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So
that's, that's a
they're
very good point.
actually they're being able to avoid the things and to do things in a much different way than what we did, and getting those big sponsorship deals ahead of the game. That's pretty smart too. And I want to add one other thing, which is a weirdly negative thing that I think helps with the marketing point of view, is some awful things have been going on in women's sports or in sports in general in Canada that impact women. For example, the Hockey Canada scandals and stuff like that. And you had these big sponsors like Canadian Tire who were backing, Hockey Canada, who now wanted to distance themselves from that ugliness. And I mean, here comes NSL. What a perfect way to like get out of the ugliness and support women by sponsoring this league. I think it's a massive boon for them, and it's good to see something positive come out of some negative things. But I think that's another thing that helps the marketing. Like I think they've done a wonderful job, but I think there's also some things that have actually helped push them along as well.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Like, as you said, we kind of where the first ones out there kind of doing whatever, but like I'm not too sure. Like, so forgive me for this, but like, are they tied in to CSB as well, or are they their own entity and they don't have anything? And I think maybe that was a crutch that hurt us a little bit, and we obviously the negative impact around them being involved, the CPL and all that kind of stuff. So that could be another point. So we could probably talk about this for the rest of our lives, to be honest with you. But yeah, congratulations to the NSL. They've done such an amazing job to the way they've launched it, and it's definitely going to help with some exciting times in Canadian football. So, Kev, the main reason we had you on, apart from the fact that we think you're awesome, is you guys are playing against us on the weekend, and we kind of want to get the lowdown of what's been going on with the champion. So you've kind of had like a little bit of a mixed bag recently. You've had a couple of losses, and I'm not trying to. We're in no position to give anybody shit about anything here. So, but like, what's been going on? Like, has the you had a couple of bad results, or you had a very bad result against Atletico Ottawa after that magnificent performance in Montreal. So, as the camp champ, hurt us a little bit. New players, obviously, you had the whole thing with Tristan Henry in the off season, kind of impacting stuff. So, what's the feeling around Hamilton with the way things are going for this season?
Yeah, great question, because it has been like really a roller coaster, up and down. And I think part of the thing that's kind of made it weirdly tougher for Forge fans is we started off so well, which is not a Forge trademark. Like we always start slowly the season. So to come right out the gate pretty fast was amazing. So I think everybody was, and I think in the back of our minds, whether we'll admit it or not, there was a lot of, I wouldn't say despair. That's a little bit far-fetched, but we thought this was going to be our hardest season. Tristan Henry, well publicized, he's out, and he's clearly like the best keeper we've ever had. And maybe one of the best the league has ever had, if not the best, which I would argue. So losing him in the way that we lost him was really difficult, right? And then you're thinking of like Ruben Spacias moving on. He's a top-notch striker for us, and all these different players. And then obviously losing a player, which was a transfer, which was awesome, but losing one of our best defenders was also a big thing. So I think we were expecting a little bit of a downside, and then we started really hot. And all of a sudden we're like, oh yeah, this is just the way we do. So then we play well against Montreal, as you said, and make some history. And then right after that, just show up with a nothing burger at Ottawa, where we'd never lost a game before, right? That's our house on Bank Street. But all of a sudden we were in a little bit of trouble. Then we come back with a really good performance against York. So again, everything is fixed. Everything is fine. It was just a blip. And then we have that performance against Calgary, against Calvary in Calgary, which I mean was disappointing the way we played. It just wasn't ourselves, but it's not a bad side we're playing and it's in their home. So I don't want to panic over it, but that's basically, it's just a roller coaster right now. And I think players will tell you otherwise. The coaching staff will tell you otherwise, but I think playing on multiple fronts, it does get in your head a little bit about, you're laying it all out on the line in this really big game, and then you come out and have a flat tire in the next game. I think that's understandable, if not desirable, right? But then in general, what's going on in the city, I could talk about this forever, what's going on with the team. I think for me, the biggest thing is that I wasn't all despairing when I saw the changes, because I knew we had some pretty good players. I was expecting Guanier to have a comeback season after his injury, and Borges was kind of in the same boat. So I thought that we were going to have almost like two new signings in those two guys, but we've had revelations in a couple of players. And I'll tell you right now, the best signing of the season, in my opinion, is Daniel Para. Our left, like, we have not lost anything defensively with his play. He's just incredible. It's something that I don't think anybody expected, but he's just been tremendous for us. And I mean, it makes sense. A guy who's come through the Monterrey system, had a chance to play in the Mexican second division where he was the leading goal scorer on his team as a defender. Like, I mean, the guy's got skills, right? So him coming on the team has been amazing. And I think it flew under the radar because there was a much bigger defensive signing in Ottawa with Mateo DeBrienne, which I totally get because we watched him become a star in this league, right? And I think we all were kind of cheering for him on a bad team in Valor. So I think he was the big story, but I think that let Daniel Parra kind of go under the radar a little bit. And then there's a couple of players in the city right now who are just being tremendous, who were already with Forge, but didn't have those roles. And I think I just can't talk enough about, I just interviewed him, so I'll plug that a little bit myself. But talking to Malcolm Duncan, that guy, like, he was always a good squad player. It was nice to have somebody off the bench who would, focus on the defensive aspect, but his offensive game, his passing, his willingness to do just about everything Bobby asked of that position has been like a revelation. And the other player that I think is the same way, like Garvin Methuselah is amazing, but he's off with Haiti right now. He's being injured a little bit. So the fact that we have a guy like Malik Olawale Bellewu, Mob is just incredible. And he's like a no-nonsense old school defender. Like, he's played like all Bobby's players. He's had to be able to play in a bunch of different positions. But he loves being a center back, and he just loves to get stuck in. And you could see it in what was a pretty poor overall performance against a good Cavalry team. Malik really stood out as being a really top-notch defender.
Yeah, I mean,
I could talk forever, so you cut me off and tell me what else you want to hear.
No, but like as you mentioned there, like, I mean, like Tristan Borges has obviously found his form. He's been amazing. Chaudier he's just it's kind of crazy that he still plays in the CPL to me, because he's such a good, he's like he's a big game player. But like Kwasi Poku playing up front is, as you mentioned, like, I think that of all the teams, because every team needs to have multifunctional players that will slot into different spots. It's kind of because we've got a shorter squad list than most teams. A lot of players have been asked to play like different things, but like, I think, was he playing like on the wing, or he's playing like right back or left back or something, and now he's like your striker. So I just want to talk a little bit about how that's kind of been working out, like having him up front.
Yeah, no, you nailed it right on the head. That's exactly, like, this is Bobby's MO, right? Like, he wants players to be positionally flexible enough that they can make themselves useful in lots of different positions. And it's a good thing and a bad thing. But speaking specifically about Kwesi, I think he always felt that he could be a forward. He's played on the wing and he's played forward in, when he was younger. So he always knew he could do that. And Bobby knew that he could do that as well from, his knowledge of him going back. But getting somebody to do that quickly, I think, is what's impressive, because he was, like you said, he was like a left back doing so well at that position, then moved up to a winger, and we are like, oh, he looks really good offensively if he can get into the play a little bit more. But then to move to striker, like, you saw it in his first match against Pacific, he was just offside all the time. Like, he was just leaving offside. And I think he didn't know the role, right? It's just little things that seem silly, but when you're on another part of the pitch, that's not one of your concerns. And him watching the line, and then by his next game at it, it looked like he'd been doing it forever. And to do it in such a big place like Montreal, it just speaks to, like, what a great soccer player he is. that, put him in a position, give him enough time, he'll adapt to it and make it work. And I think that also speaks, again, with this, how amazing and incredibly well he played in that position. It speaks to one of the problems Forge has, if you can call it a problem, in that I don't think Forge as a team is designed necessarily well to be the regular season or league champion. I think that the playoffs are where they shine, and there's a reason for that. Bobby is such a tinkerer. He has a definite sense of how we play, but he's such a tinkerer that he uses the regular season to try all different things within the formation and players out of position and playing different spots. That once the playoffs come and it's do or die, every player is comfortable and confident in a multiple different areas, right? So when the game's on the line, like I remember against Ottawa in the finals when Forge won in Ottawa, I remember Garvin Matusla coming on, center back, but coming on and playing a more of a midfield role and helping shut down the game and set up the winning goal with Choinière. And I was just like, who saw that coming? But they see it coming, right? Because they've done these little things all throughout the season to prepare for the big games. And it's what helped them in CONCACAF runs, what helps them in playoff runs, and now to beat Montreal. It's the constant tinkering, really good for knockout qualifications, playoffs, all that kind of stuff. Less great for running the table and becoming invincible.
Yeah, I think somebody said on the commentary, which I thought was a really good line, that they said that Calvary is the team to beat in July, but Forge is the one to beat in October. And I think that's a really good way of putting it, that Calvary are probably the opposite of that. That that they're season regulars because they don't do as much tinkering as the rest of us. I think the big one we've seen this season has been Sean kind of moving. I think he played defense, but most people are kind of set in the way they're going to set up. So we're gonna bore you a little bit and just talk a little bit about Wanderer stuff here. If that's okay with you.
Real quick though, Anthony,
Yeah,
it's awesome to hear that come from you, Kev. I don't know if it was you, Anthony, or if it was Gary. But when we were doing the season preview, we actually talked about that, how it seems like Bobby uses the first 10 to 15 games of the regular season just to kick the can and see what happens. And after like that 14th, 15th game, here we all are doubting them. We can smell the blood. Oh, Forge might not even make the playoffs. It's like clockwork every year. And then when things matter, come August, September, they just hit the ground. So it's actually kind of cool hearing that from you, Kev. And real quick, I know Anthony wants to move on, but a question to follow up on that. And I think Anthony sort of answered it to an extent, especially when you look at how last year is that why the complacency is avoided? Is that why you think Forge is there every year? Because this is Bobby's philosophy, whereas with Tommy's philosophy, it's come out the gate and here we are winning a league title with weeks in advance. They really don't have anything to play for. And then when it matters, they're complacent. Do you think that that's why Forge has avoided kind of hitting that wall in the last 6 years?
Yeah, no, I think it's an excellent question. And I think one of the things it's so hard to understand what goes on with Forge, because if you look at like our all-time record against different teams and stuff like that, we struggle against Valor. Halifax does a number on us. These are the teams that are toughest for us. Now Vancouver is a team, like they got their first ever win against Forge and stuff like that. But I think it's because they're such, like you see with Choinière and others, they're such big game players that even though they want to minute, they are a team of winners and they want to always win. But I think there's a little bit of letting up on the gas but making sure their eyes are always on that big prize. And whether that's, doing something in the Canadian Championship like they did this year, which was a big thing on their poster board, I'm sure, this year, because it was one thing they hadn't had, or whether it's doing well in CONCACAF, which was one thing that they hadn't had until they got there. And I think the playoffs have just always been, it's about that gelling throughout the season so that you're at your best at the end. And I think that's something that Bobby really preaches. And I think to Calgary's credit, Tommy does such an amazing job with their identity, that 90 minutes of hell kind of high pressing, that is their style and they'll go out and play it. And I think because they are so at home in that skin, they're always going to do well throughout the season. Even with a rough start like this now, you can still feel that they're going to be out there towards the end. But it's those big games now, it's psychological, right? Because it's been so many years of them not quite getting over the hump, but knowing they're good enough to during the regular season, I think that weighs on them. So I don't know if that answers exactly your question. And I didn't get a chance to jump in the mix with what Ottawa's doing. And hopefully we'll talk about that later because I kind of love/hate them right now too.
Yeah, we all do. So yeah, like I think no, but I think going forward, we're just going to kick Gary off opposition corner, and we just have somebody from each area. It's pretty cool, like hearing because we don't always get to feel what's going on in the different cities, right? Because we just see what's going on in CPL newsroom or wherever it is.
If I can jump in real quick, I did have a request from Gary. I remember he wanted me to just sit here with a shit English accent and like
Oh,
pretend to be him. So I'll just real quickly say stuff like Groskov. That's all I can say with a brief thing. But and one other thing, ooh, my piles are killing me. That's
yeah.
another thing I think Gary would say. So.
Well, actually this week he has scarlet fever, so but he's just gonna have all these vague Victorian era illnesses. So yeah.
I love that.
Speedy recovery, Gary. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to touch a little bit on. I don't want to get into the weeds with the weekend, Chris, because it was
Yeah.
we should have won. Obviously, we came up against stubborn Pacific team who are again set up really well. James Merriman is such. I think I took for granted how good of a tactical manager he is. But yeah, so this week obviously we were missing Thiago. Valesky was back on the bench, but obviously wasn't probably fit enough to start because he's been missing for a couple of weeks. So we had to start with a strikerless system, as you put it earlier on, which I thought was really good. So we want to just tell us how we kind of set up, how people's kind of slotted into a kind of somewhat different system.
Yeah, it was weird on paper when you looked at the lineup. The assumption was, okay, we're actually going to see Farron up front. We haven't seen him up front. We've seen him cutting in from the left and then kind of like drifting in and out of the lines, in and out of the wings. But when we kicked off, and first thing I want to point out, it was kind of weird seeing Patrice pull that almost like set play off of the kickoff. I don't know if the lads knew what was going on. And the next thing you knew, Julian Dunn was basically the highest player
Yeah, I
on the
know,
field
crazy, right?
on the press. I liked it. It was a little bit of whimsy that we know that Patrice has up his sleeve. And, during the season that we've had, anything, any goal counts, every goal counts. So if it's something that they tried in training and it worked, great. It just really didn't kick off. But yeah, it was generally speaking a strikerless system. And the reason why it kind of took me by surprise is because we've been drifting between three different type of striker systems, striker styles. We've had like the front three, we've had the 1-2, we've had a hard two, and we've had just a single striker up front. So, I hate to say it in this kind of weird way because I don't want Patrice to think that I'm talking shit to an extent, but like he's run out of options. So let's try no striker. So the first 5-10 minutes, it actually worked really well because I think it caught Pacific off guard.
Yeah.
You were talking about the type of manager James Merriman is. If anybody took them for granted this year, I am that sort. I said from the beginning of the year, I don't know if they improved enough in the transfer market. I thought the players that they lost were just too much to replace. I thought that it might take a year for this new system to gel, these new players to gel. Next thing I know, these guys are arguably the best team in the league when the ball's not on their feet. And I think that we got a really good demonstration of that for the entire 90 minutes, but especially after we went up a man. But yes, to answer your question, Anthony, it was a strikerless system, but it actually had remnants and similarities to the system that we used in the last match against Ottawa, kind of like that 4-3-1-2, but the twos were a lot wider. And the reason I think the twos were a lot wider, and it worked to a strong extent, trying to keep guys like, and I always pronounce his last name wrong, but La Jeunesse and KDL, keeping them as wide as possible, but as far back as possible. And from that perspective, it worked. But what we've been worried about all season, and it kind of reared its ugly head, is we've had issues in the center of midfield. And shout out to former Wanderer Pierre Lamonth. I know the ratings and the stats didn't look too glamorous, but him off the ball, moving around, getting into those pockets, he was frustrating us, and he was forcing guys like Probo and Daniels to drop deep. So after that first 10-15 minutes, we saw Merriman make those adjustments. We saw Merriman pushing those center midfielders up higher. And what ended up happening was as we were tucking in, they were finally starting to get that width. I hate to use the term create your own luck. I think Pacific did a good job of creating their own luck. They lost the ball in low percentage areas where we've seen the Wanderers put some counterattack. I mean, we saw against Ottawa how threatening we were on the counterattack. But I think Pacific played strategically to the weather. And we always talk about how the Nova Scotian weather, the Halifax weather, we have that advantage where we've got just this different style of rain and this different atmosphere with the pitch that it should be an advantage for us. But if any team kind of gets the weather, it would be the team from Victoria. They've got a
Yeah.
completely different pitch, obviously, but a similar weather, a similar kind of feel, that fogginess, that dewiness almost. And I felt like they were almost playing the skips on the ground a little bit better than we were. So where I think Patrice's setup was to attack with the counter when Pacific lost the ball, Pacific were doing a really, really good job of making sure that when they lost the ball, it was in those low percentage areas.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of people I know were kind of frustrated by the whole thing, but we also did. Uh, it was one of our better performances, in fairness. But it's just, again, it was just that kind of just that last little turn of the field where you just kind of wanted like one of those passes. Obviously, we hit the bar again, and it seems to be like our running team this year. But just kind of go back to uh, the way that James Merriman had these guys set up. Like, I mean, when they went to player down, you could just feel that everybody was like, "Yep, here we go, we're going to do this." And then we brought Valesky on, and it was like we're all going to be dynamic. And Valesky did change the game somewhat when he came on, but they were just set up so well, even with when they went down to players. Like they're just so well marshaled, aren't they?
Yeah. And he didn't panic and made changes. Like the players on the field almost knew, here's what we have to do. And, I jokingly called it like a rainbow setup, but that is kind of what it felt like. Like eventually the fullbacks dropped almost deeper than the center backs. They were creating that wall, kind of like a half oval wall. And they weren't scared to take fouls 40, 50 yards away. Like they had a game plan. And, we saw it last year. We obviously were up a man the way we were up a man this time around, but against Pacific in the playoffs last year, when they scored that goal, they kind of moved into this system when the Wanderers had the ball for 20, 25 minutes. You and I, Anthony, like you said, all right, that almost that same emotion, same feeling, same team. Yeah, we're going to go on and do this. Yep, finally, we're going to get over this hump. Obviously, we're going to score. We got a half hour to score. I think Merriman did a really good job of making sure his guys didn't panic. I don't think he made a sub until like the 80 something minute. Like it was later in the half. And that was the part that frustrated me the most. And I was even getting a little bit vocal with my neighbors in the seats. Like, we've had 20 minutes with these guys up a man and we haven't tired them out yet. Like, but as much as we want to be critical, and it's easy to be critical, it's easy to be upset at because of how the season has gone. You said it, Anthony. On paper, you take this result in a weird way, the way Pacific has played this year. It's almost like last week. Like, if you're given the result on paper, you take it, but then you see how the game plays out, and it's just like those are points dropped. And I said this
Yeah.
to you privately, Anthony. Like, I try to be as optimistic as possible. These are 4 unacceptable points to drop.
Yep.
Irregardless of how the season has started. We could be in Ottawa's position, but these are still points that are not great to drop. So, but yeah, I have to just, echo you, Anthony. James Merriman, he's proven me so wrong already this season. He has a squad of guys that, like I've said over the weeks, just go to war for him.
Yeah,
And,
man.
yeah,
They'll run through walls for him. So,
literally.
Kev, I don't want to leave you totally out of our conversation here, and I don't want you to fall asleep on us. But so I kind of wanted to get like, it's very difficult for when you're amongst it all because like we're here, we're living it, blah blah blah. So it's kind of very difficult to kind of take an outside like an overview of what's happening. So what looking at the Wanderers and you're looking at how our season's gone, like what's the opinion from outside of Halifax of what has gone on with our season?
It's kind of crazy, but it's not a ton different than last year in a weird way. Because last year, maybe you guys started off with all, I'm sure you all know, you guys had all those ties, which should have been wins and stuff like that, and you just couldn't get that first 3 points. And this year, it's just like you're on the other side of that as you're getting the losses instead of the ties. But it's never looking like you're not in the game. At least, not the, you seem to be the curse of all fans. Like, it looks like it's getting better, but you're still not getting the results, right?
Yeah.
So from the outside, it looks like you're not as bad as the table suggests, but at the end of the day, it matters what the table says, not what you don't get style points, right? But I mean, it's a really confusing one because there's so many things from the outside. You're looking at things. I'm like, I don't think, and I probably get flattered by this from other fans, but I don't think Vancouver is as good as their points are. Like, I don't think they're that much better than other teams, but they beat us at our house, so I have to say they're great. And I don't think Halifax is as bad as what the table shows them. But this league is what, with the exception of the much hated Atletico team, everybody's kind of right there in the mix still. And even though you guys are way down at the bottom and Atletico's way like pulling away from us, I don't think it's over in any sense either way. And especially with the 5 playoff spots being in play, there's lots of time still left to make it up. But it is confusing for me because I have such respect for Patrice, and his style of play, and what he's been able to do in the short time that he was there. That it seems it's so surprising that they took such a big backward step. And I really thought Bolesky. I think a lot of people thought Bolesky was going to be like this kind of perfect kind of fit in that he played in USL and been a successful kind of journeyman scorer. And that's kind of the thing you want in a league, a guy who's played in this kind of caliber league, and knows how to get the best of goalies and defensive. So for it all not working for whatever reason, like signing Julian Dunn and like good quality moves and stuff like that. So for it to be playing out the way it is, I think is mostly just confusing for teams. But as a Hamilton fan, I just know that means that you guys are going to beat us because teams that are playing terrible always do. So that's probably where you guys get it turned around. But I'm not cheering for that on the weekend.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, I mean, we've kind of mentioned it before. Like, we were kind of talking about this last week that everything's so tight now. Like, I mean, like we don't have an FC Edmonton anymore. Like Valor, we all thought Valor was going to be the FC Edmonton this year, and they've stepped it up. And they've been putting in some really good performances, winning games. Like they beat us for the first time at home and all that kind of stuff. And it just feels like we're um just the luck has gone against us, and it's kind of that kind of. But the problem is, you get sucked into that, and you kind of just feel like, woe betide, or woe is me. It's like kind of like constant, like it's that rain cloud over everything, and it's just starting to feel a little bit like we keep on saying it's going to turn around, it's going to turn around, turn around, but as you said, the table doesn't lie, and we're kind of just being pushed away from where we need to be. And Chris, I kind of want to just get like you sit in 104, which is like I think it's a really good spot to feel the mood because like down the patio, it's all kind of like a little bit of a party vibe anyway. But obviously you have hardcore fans there that will voice their opinions, and you've got people who are just kind of just there for a good time, which is fine. But you're kind of in the heart of it. So what's kind of been the feelings around where you are? You kind of said there a little bit about the atmosphere a little bit, but like what are people saying to you, like behind you when they're talking about how we've been doing or where we're gonna go, where we're gonna end up?
By far, I think the most anxious and animosity over the last, well, say 6 years now. I was saying to you guys in the chat, this was the first time I heard boos, literally. And we're talking about some pretty hard seasons with some pretty rough results over the years, but there was always still that respect. A lot of the fans in 104 do a really good job of sticking around after the game, saluting the boys, applauding them off. And I'm not talking just dozens of people, like a few hundred people sometimes will stick around.
Yeah.
People will come from other sections to congregate and, come see mom. And, it's a good view to talk to the players even after the game without having to actually be standing right next to them. Those numbers have dwindled significantly. Credit to the club, credit to the boys. They've still come around to salute us. And, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to stop doing that. It's been a tradition of mine from day one. My son loves it. He gets to see Zach, whether he's playing or not. Like, it's just little things and little traditions. No matter how hard this gets, no matter how bad this gets, we're trying as hard as we can as the Searle family to keep things as normal. But it's really hard to ignore the atmosphere, Anthony. There's less of an enthusiasm. There's less hope. You hear more of the negativity now. You hear more of the comments between plays. If somebody makes a mistake, it's less of, get him next time or an optimism. It's more of a pessimism. Oh, he did this again, or he did that again. It's negative. I would be lying to say it's not. That being said, there are some people in our section who have really taken it upon themselves to try to be that positive voice. And it's been great because as much as I want to be that positive voice, I've even found myself kind of falling into that rut a little bit where I'm not up and clapping and cheering and getting the crowd riled up as much as I can. I've had a few people actually come up to me and give me credit for them being able to come out of their shell and be more energetic. And if I hear something behind me, I'll turn around, hey, good job. Like I'll give them the salute just so I know that we all still feel like we're a family, no matter how hard this has been from where I'm at and B all the way back to Gary and Z. 104 has
Yeah.
always been, like you said, Anthony, that heartbeat. So I would be lying to say that the pulse is as positive as it used to be, because it's certainly not.
Yeah, it's we still had 6,000 hearty souls out there on a really shitty day. So I mean, at the end of the day, people are still turning up and like hoping that things turn around. And I'm not trying to make that just a negative thing. I just kind of think that it's something that you know we have the people need to be aware of, is that like that kind of, we don't want to fall into that, because we've been there before, and it's not a nice place to be around when the Wanderers grounds gets kind of very pessimistic, like that. We all know what we're talking about. So, just go back to something a little bit more positive, and then we can go on to some questions. Good old Clem, has been a revelation. I think it was a really good signing. Patrice talked a little bit about him in the presser and stuff like that, but his impact has been pretty much immediate. So what did you think when he came on and what he brought to the team, Chris?
I think both matches, aside from the corner flag thing, we're not going to
Yeah,
talk about that. But, he's such a great player, such a progressive player, such a forward thinking player. He seems to look at all three options and make that decision quickly. I think that one of the issues so far this season has been we feel like we're kind of rushing things. We're trying to force things into situations we don't have to. Here's a player coming into a pretty high octane situation where, a result is necessary. He hasn't been here for the last couple of months. So he's coming in with a freshness and a freedom mentally, and we're seeing it on the field. Like I said, he goes through his progressions very quickly and he finds the right decisions. The 1-2s that he was playing with the midfield was exceptional. He just seems to be able to find that edge around the fullback, or being able to get in between the fullback and the center back and get into those, I want to say, outer attacking positions, but he's even found himself cutting in into a goal scoring opportunity. So he has been a revelation for sure. I remember when we signed Fumpa, how when he first came, he kind of changed the dynamic
yeah,
of the team. There was more of a creativity. There was more of a forwardness. I hope this ends better than the Fumpa
yeah, me
situation,
too.
obviously. But yeah, Anthony, he has been a breath of fresh air. And I think that as he starts to get acclimated to the system and gets more minutes, I can see the system genuinely building through him and Farron, kind of on that outside in the attacking depth. So, welcome to the city, Clem. It's been fantastic already having him with the club. And the other part, really quickly, is we need guys to be on their toes, and having him coming in, giving 110%, obviously, in training, because if he's doing this on the field, he must be doing it in training. I think this is going to also take everybody up a level, up a step. Here, this guy's coming in to help us out, playing at this level. We have to step up to that level too. We saw that year with Fumpa. Campagna came in, and by the end of the season, he was probably our best defender. Like, this has remnants of that, of kind of assigning not only to have that impact on the field, but also push everybody off the field to be their best.
Yeah, so it's good to end on a positive note, and I've really enjoyed. It's like, as you said, it's the kind of thump effect when he comes on. It's that kind of just gives everybody a little boost of energy, and he just seems to all have a smile on his face too, which helps. So just get into our questions for this week. The first one, Chris, I think me, you, Gary, and Kev, what we'll do is before, if you have time, this one was from Ian, who asked, not exactly Wanderers related, but any predictions for the Euros and Copa America? We'd love to hear your thoughts on teams and or certain players to watch for. So I think what we'll do is maybe we'll, if you want to do like a little thing of who you think will be the players to watch, and then we can kind of do our predictions, and we can kind of post it on Instagram. I think that'll be the best way to do that one.
That's a cool idea, yeah. And to
Yeah,
involve Kevin, I think, is cool because
yeah,
it's
so,
relatable
yeah,
to the episode.
yeah, exactly. And
I
then
love that.
yeah, this one's from, and this was from Tractor Boy, Nova Scotia. This is um, So inspired by having to miss the last match to go to Cirque du Soleil's, which is pretty darn good, to be honest. Who's the biggest clown you've seen at the Wanderers ground? Or if you don't wish to offend, who's the most graceful athlete you've seen at the Wanderers ground? And Kev will do the same thing for Tim Hortons Field. So Chris, who's the biggest? Let's just be mean here. Who's the biggest clown you've seen at the Wanderers ground?
Oh, it's funny because a contender for the answer plays for us now, so I
Oh
don't.
God. Okay.
I would say just because here we are in year six, and it's still a memory that comes up all the time. When they were just here in town a couple of weeks ago, I would say Jordan Muriel when he
Yeah,
kicked the table.
I
I
was just
think that,
thinking that.
yeah, I think him for sure. He's a nice guy off the field, but on the field, Escalante was a bit of a shithouse. I think that he left a sour taste in a lot of Wanderers fans' mouths that will last for a long time. So him too. But honestly, we were even talking about this hilariously at the game. On the field, there's villains, but off the field, we have a league of just the nicest freaking guys, man. Like, there's not a lot of douchebags, if you will, in this league. Anthony, you and I have gotten to know guys over the years, and Kev, you're in the same boat in Hamilton, where the Forge players, but you've also gotten to know players on other teams as well. Um, just a consummate league of really, really polite, gentle, kind men who understand their responsibility as professional footballers. And yeah, they're not making the hundreds of thousands a week that those pros are, but like I said, my son sees Zach after every game. To my son, Zach is Messi. So these guys are all great. But yeah, there's a few that put the paint on when they're on the field.
Yeah, man. That's a pretty good list. I would also probably say do you remember was it the guy somebody threw like a beer can or a bottle at Fraser Aird or something?
Fraser aired,
Yeah,
yes.
whoever threw that bottle is probably the biggest clown I've seen. Kev, what about out in Ford?
I mean, there's probably a few contenders, but you already said Chris already named the guy that's got to be the by far and away the biggest clown on the pitch, Escalante. I mean, him in Hamilton, like people were bringing out cards specifically for him. Like in the supporter section, all had yellow cards to put up for every time he dove, and he got the crowd so riled up. He is such a pantomime villain. It's like almost after every big play, maybe you just could see him twirling the little mustache. Like he was just incredible. And I have a great story about him too, because in the first season, we already hated him from his diving and his he definitely is a master of the CONCACAF dark arts, and he brought that with him. But I remember the championship game the first season in Calgary. I was lucky enough to be there, and when Forge won, like we got to go right down on the pitch with the players, and it was incredible. And I remember that the cavalry players came up to get their medals, and it's just got to be the worst feeling to you're getting given a second place medal at a final game. It's got to suck. And I remember one player chucked his into the crowd like he was
Oh
just not
wow.
having it. Yeah, it was really poor. But that player was not Escalante. And Escalante was walking towards us. And, we were like applauding them, but kind of being a little bit cheeky about it and stuff. And guys wanted no part of it really, or they would just nod. But Escalante came right over to me. And I said, hey, there's a whole city back home that hates you. And I know his English wasn't the strongest, but he had the biggest smile on his face. And he gave
I
me a huge hug on the
love
pitch.
that.
And I was just like, class guy, but we hated him. For that 90 minutes, he was public enemy number one in Hamilton.
That's a great story. I love that, man. And that's the thing. At the end of the day, you know, um, that's what it's all about. It's like you kind of have your battles on the pitch, and then once you walk off it, we're all fans of the sport, right? This
Right.
one is from. Let me see here. So we got through Becca's one. We'll go to Eddie's one at the end. This one's from Andrew Beeman. He always comes up with like the best questions. If you had to pick a new career for a Wanderers player based solely on their appearance, who would you pick and what job would you give them? Example, Nimic would be a firefighter, Fillion would be a lobster fisherman. So Chris, what do you think? I think Provo would be like a cardigan model. I just feel like he just like he just seemed like wearing like on the cost or something like that. He's too good looking, that guy.
4 words.
Yeah, go
Dan
for it.
Nimick for mayor.
Yeah. Well, seeing some of the people who are going for it, I think he'd actually probably fucking win, to be perfectly honest with you. God help
Yeah,
us.
that would definitely be my answer. Dan Nimitz
Yeah,
for mayor.
love it.
Shout out to Christian Oxner. Actually, I played against him last night. Tidy midfielder, man. He's better outside than he is in net. He'd make a great car salesman. Um,
That's a really that's a really good one. I like that one.
I can't
Uh,
think of too many others though. Maybe like Jan Michael and Fillion would both be bouncers.
John Michael would definitely be a bouncer. I could see
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
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 yeah. But we're glad they're wanderers. So
yeah. Mario asked a question, and I think we've kind of gone over this today. So it was just about what's gone wrong so far this season. We've kind of touched upon a little bit of like, it's just those little bits and pieces that just aren't clicking for whatever reason. So in the final third, but
well, like I was saying, even to answer the question without answering the question, like when you create your own luck, right? Like I don't feel like we're taking those chances. I don't feel I feel like teams are taking those chances against us and getting rewarded. I don't feel like we're taking the same chances against the opponents. So like if I can answer that question in summary, that would be, we're just not quite creating the luck. It's a weird thing because luck is luck. We've had bad luck this year, but we've also put ourselves in those positions. We've created enough bad luck. I want to see some more risk, I guess would be probably well, not what's wrong, but what I want to see kind of change in the next couple of matches.
So Kev, I kind of just before we let you go, tell us all about the podcast, why you started it, where we can check you out on the socials, what the cool kids say, and what platforms should people check out the show.
Perfect. If you're looking for me on socials, Hammer of Sparx on Instagram and Hammer of Sparx on Twitter. I'll usually drop some information and some little humorous stuff in the lead up and try not to get into too much banter with Eddie and the Ottawa boys. And then as for the podcast itself, I just was really looking for something to do more than just showing up to games. I love being in the supporter section. I love being like a day one season ticket holder. I love all the events that they have, but I wanted to do even more. And this is just a perfect opportunity to get that talk to some of the local heroes and just find out what it is they love off, like more than the pitch. As much as I love hearing everything they want to talk about soccer, I want to get to know them as people, and I want the fans to get to know them as people. So that's basically what the podcast is about. We've had some really great episodes here, and I just wrapped one with Malcolm Duncan. He was phenomenal, and I'm looking forward to doing a couple more this week. And so, yeah, if you guys get the chance, Hammer of Sparx, we've got hammerofsparx.ca to read my musings of kind of my opportunity to rant, because I don't get to do that on the podcast. And then the podcast for just a nice, and the other thing too is it's not contentious. It's not, we don't need to trash talk anybody. It's just getting to have a sit down conversation with some young stars. And I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's I've listened to quite a few of the episodes. I really enjoy the way you talk to people. It's kind of what we try to do here too, is like to kind of let people know. We haven't really got around to it that much this year because I just feel like I'll start crying talking to the players. So, but it is great to get to know their backstories. Like when players join us, it's the same for you guys. You get like a blurb. They play for this. They grew up here, play for this team,
Yeah.
and that's all you get to know. So you don't really get to know like what they're like as people behind the scenes. So it is a really good way for people to get to know, and you're really good at what you do. So yeah, check out Kev's podcast. You've given us some really in-depth stuff on Forge here. So hopefully Patrice picks up a few pointers for the weekend. And yeah, man, hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. And I really love everything that you guys do. So it's an honor to be on the show. And I look forward to hearing from you guys after the game when you guys are crying in your beers again.
Yep. Thanks, man. Cheers. And just before we go, obviously, get well soon, Gary. Hopefully, the typhus rights itself and your your medication fixes all the issues you've been having. All right, boys. Have a great night. Thanks for the milk, Kev. Chris, always a pleasure, buddy. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ant.
See you.
Folks, please. Right foot, please. Time to drink up, folks. Get out. Out to book.